welcome to this episode of the Martial Truth Podcast. Running a traditional dojo. Before we get started, just returned from 4 days of seminars in New York. Everything was great. Really enjoyed it. Had some people come. Some old-time Ishinryu senseis came down and made the trip. It was great to meet them. And a good time, I think, was had by all. I know I enjoyed it. I really liked teaching, and I really enjoyed and appreciate them having me out there for seminars. All right. As always, consider becoming a member of the channel. It's $2.99 a month. Please, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Okay. Think about hitting that like button, share the podcast. I appreciate it. All right, and share any of the videos I post. All right. There'll be a lot of video in the next few weeks of me teaching at the New York seminar. So. Without further ado, let's talk about running a traditional dojo. So initially when I started teaching, I rented space 2 days a week, and I did that for a long time. Then for a year, I went in partners with my original instructor and 4 other people. That was a disaster. I was doing all the teaching, doing all the work, and getting treated like garbage. So after a year, I left. So around 1991, I decided to open and start my own thing. So what I did was I found a dance school right near my house, and I rented space 2 days a week to start, and I was only teaching Ishinryu karate. As things went on, people wanted me to teach jiu-jitsu, so we added jiu-jitsu. By the end of like a year and a half, 2 years, I was renting her space 7 days a week, teaching Mariyoshi Kobudo, Sosui Shitsudo Jiu-Jitsu, Ishinryu Karate, And then what happened was I came down on a 4th of July weekend. I was going to do some working out, and there was a notice on the door from the marshals that they were seizing the property for lack of rent payment. Immediately called her, got her on the phone. She said, oh, well, this is July. I'm going to pay through September. Okay, warning bells in my head. I decided I was going to take the plunge and get an actual storefront myself, which I did. Just 2 or 3 streets down. Storefront had been empty a long time, and I got that one, and I started teaching there. And most of my friends that had traditional dojo were starting to fall by the wayside. They just couldn't keep them open. They couldn't compete. So how did I do it, and how does the dojo in New York still thrive to this day? Well, number one was I had a real job. Okay, my wife had a real job. So my goal was for the dojo to make money, but it was never a case of where I had to rely on it to make my living. So best advice I can give you is to, if you want to teach, if you want to have a dojo, best advice, find a community center, a dance school, something like that. Make some type of arrangement where maybe you decide to split whatever comes in. Maybe you pay a specific monthly fee to rent the space 2 nights a week, whatever. You'll get to teach, you'll have your dojo, you get to train, and you're lessening the risk of a business failing, okay? This is probably the best way to go, all right? The positive thing about having a storefront or a building like I have here out in Arizona is whenever I feel like going and working out, I just walk out and I come and work out, all right? In New York, the school was a little different. All the black belts that were 18 and up all had keys to the dojo. So literally you could go down there anytime and find somebody working out. And I love that aspect of the way I had set up that particular dojo in New York. And it's still the case to this day with Jimmy Waller now running it. All right. So again, if you're looking to run a school, a traditional school, it becomes extremely difficult to run a traditional school when you're relying on it to pay your bills. Now, if you're in certain parts of the United States, absolutely you can do it. But if you're in New York, a very high rent, a very high cost state to operate a business in, or California, or certain other states that are very kind of anti-business, and charge you through the nose for every little thing, it's going to be pretty difficult. So my goal was to make some money, and the dojo did make some money, but it wasn't anywhere near the money to cover my monthly bills, but it covered some of the bills, which was great and which was nice. And I had the space for 7 days, and I could teach, which I love to do, and I could train whenever I want, which I love to do, and it worked out great. So some other things. So many of my contemporaries were not willing to give it all in certain of their traditional beliefs. They refused to promote children to black belt, okay, which again, if a child starts at 4 and they hit 8 or 9 years old, they're there 5, 6 years, okay? Why shouldn't they be able, if they're working hard, why shouldn't they be able to make black belt? Again, is it a black belt the same as an adult? No, but you want the kid to have incentive and keep training. You want him to last and go into the adult class. And that's what we found with the method we did. We had many kids that tested for black belt between the ages of, let's say, 9 or 10 and 12, and those kids stuck around. They stayed. They went into the adult class. And then many of them stayed until they went off to college. And many of them would come back when they were at home on a break from college and train. And hopefully some of them, if they move back to that area after they graduate college, they'll come back and continue their training in the dojo. But it was nice to have kids from the ages of 4 or 5 up until 17 or 18 years of age. I mean, that's a long time, all right? To not promote them to black belt, to say, oh, you have to be this age, I'm just not buying it, all right? I mean, everyone's different. You have black belts created in many different stripes, all right? Some men aren't as strong as other men. Some people aren't as physically gifted as other people. It's a barometer of that individual's training, not a comparison with others, all right? The thing I did avoid was I did not get involved with any of these marketing companies. So where you're paying the marketing company and they're paying me every month. I didn't do it. I did have contracts. I went to those very late. I was probably the last guy in New York that had a storefront school to not go to contracts. But what did I find? Oh, parents in the winter. Oh, it's cold. We're not going to bring little Johnny, okay? After a few years, and it was quite a long time. I finally decided, well, if people aren't going to be considerate of my situation, well, then they're going to have to be locked into a year contract. And frankly, once I instituted the yearly contracts, the money comes out automatically. Attendance increased dramatically. Okay. So it was a great thing. Obviously, out here in Arizona, it's a small dojo. It's just in my backyard. The building's fairly big. I mean, I can fit a decent amount of people. But I don't have contracts, okay? Don't want them, don't have an interest. I don't have the overhead, right? In New York, you have the overhead. It's, high rent. You got to pay those bills. So, yeah, I instituted contracts, and it worked out great. So contracts was great. I did have test fees for all the different Q grades, not nearly as high as some of my competitors. My monthly fees were much lower than my competitors, all right? My philosophy was always I'd rather have 50 people paying this than have 25 people paying more, all right? I like the having a lot of people in the dojo. This way there's a variety of people to train with. That worked out very good for us. I also was still of the mind that if someone joined the dojo and they were a problem, I never hesitated to get rid of them. I always felt there was a certain amount of addition by subtraction when it comes to running a dojo, and that could be anything. During COVID, we had one black belt who came in, and he had paid for the year up front, and he wanted his money back. Okay, and he was the only black belt. All the adults paid all throughout COVID, even if they weren't coming down. I mean, they felt that big a connection to the school. They didn't want to see the school go under, so they were all able to pay. And I never missed a month's rent with my landlord, which he was very pleased with because there's plenty of people during COVID not paying the rent. But, when that black belt came in and said that, He wanted his money back, which he was given a prorated refund because he had trained part of the year. And then he was told, don't come back. And he kind of looked at us and said, well, what do you mean? Well, I think it's pretty clear you're no longer welcome to train here. You're a black belt. We expect more from our black belts. You're abandoning us. We are not going to teach you anymore. Feel free to go elsewhere, but you are not welcome here. And it was made quite clear to him. And I told him that, and then he went to Jimmy Waller, who was taking over the school, and Jimmy looked at him and said, are you kidding me? You're the only black belt that's come in and pulled this stuff. No, you're not welcome here. Go somewhere else. So, we ran a fairly tight ship. We expected things of the students. We expected them to act a certain way and behave a certain way and train a certain way. We held them to a standard, which for us we felt was important. Okay. Again, but the actual running of the school, the day-to-day operations, we, again, because it was never solely about the money, things went very well for us. We were able to keep the doors open. I mean, I started the school in 91, and 3 years ago, James Waller took it over in New York. It's still going strong, so obviously we must have been doing something right. But many of my contemporaries were still trying to run dojos the way they were running them in the 60s and 70s, and that's just not the case anymore. This crazy rough and tumble stuff, this blood and guts karate, I mean, I caught the tail end of that era. Great when you're young, but you're working every day. You got to go to work. You can't be going to work with black eyes and broken ribs. I mean, people just don't want it. If that's what you want to do, you go to a school that does full contact. Okay. But a lot of people don't want to get hurt. They can't afford to get hurt. All right. They're missing work. They're out of work. They're getting surgery. It's just not good. All right. The other thing is class length. Most of our classes were an hour long. We did have a couple of hour-and-a-half classes. Most of them we had made an hour long, but we had classes 7 days a week, so you could believe me. So on a Monday night, you come in, you do Ishinryu for an hour, you do Mariyoshi Kobudo for an hour, you do Katori Shinto-ryu for an hour. All right. Wednesday night was a little different. We did Ishinryu for an hour and a half. Thursday night, you had 2 classes. Friday night, you had a 2-hour jiu-jitsu class. Saturday afternoon, you had 3 hours of class. Sunday morning, you had 3 hours of adult classes, and the format seemed to work. Some people, can only make an hour. In Japan, you have it a little bit different. A lot of the dojo are open sometimes for 2 or 3 hour classes. But what happens is some people come for the first part of the class and then they bow out and leave because they have to go to work or whatever. Some people come late. They come late for the last hour, hour and a half of the class because they just got out of work. And that seems to work very well in Japan. When you had a dojo like mine where I was teaching 6 different martial arts, we varied the days and the class times, right? So the people did Ishinryu had, 3 chances during the week to make it. Same with Mariyoshi, same with Katori. Certain arts, so Suishitsu, we only did 1 day a week on Fridays, but it was a 2-hour class. And feeding crane, we only did 1 hour a week on Thursdays because there just wasn't the demand for it. If my feeding crane classes were overflowing with people, I would have added more, but they weren't, so we kept it at that. My kids' classes were disciplined, but I ran my kids' classes as kids' classes. For instance, I go to Okinawa in 1991, and in the middle of the class, Shimabuku Kichiro Sensei has them playing kickball for 5 or 10 minutes. And I was like, what is this? So I asked him, and he said, I realized that they're training. The reward is that 10-minute game of kickball, which gets them to run around and do things. Then when we go back to the second half of the class for training, they're able to refocus, and I really get a lot out of them. So I was like, let's see. We're going to try that. So in my hour kids classes, in the middle of the kids classes, we did dodgeball. And I bought special dodgeballs that you could take a full shot in the face, wouldn't hurt you, all right? And the kids loved it. And especially modern kids, there's a little bit of a lack of aggression and that competitive nature. I see a lot of them, and I wanted to foster that a little bit. So we did different types of dodgeball games, and we found that then when they finished, when they went back to training, they were all amped up. They trained hard. If they didn't listen, if the kids were having a bad day, talking too much, being loud, not paying attention, okay, no dodgeball today. Oh boy, that was big. The kids would be like, what? What do you mean no dodgeball? How many times do I have to tell you to quiet down? How many times do I have to tell you to listen? Okay, you can bet the next class, they listened and they were quiet. I do the same thing in Arizona. In Arizona, I do the game at the end of the class, all right? If they don't listen, if they misbehave, no dodgeball. They're not happy about it. So the carrot and the stick, right? In my dojo with the kids, if they don't listen, they still do knuckle push-ups. And if they still don't listen, I make them stand in the corner. If a parent complains about it, I tell them to go to another school. I'm not teaching ballet. I'm teaching their children how to fight and harm another human being. Okay? I expect them to act a certain way. So those types of things are built into the program, and that's how we teach. Okay? Other thing I instituted, the warm-up for the beginning of the kids' class, we would do an obstacle course. So we'd have an obstacle course set up. Sometimes they're jumping over things. Sometimes they're crawling under things. They're running. Again, fooling them. It seems like a game to them. They're having fun. They're jumping over things. They're crawling under things. We might have set up a mat where they had to do a couple of rollouts as they're running. All these different things. And then what I'd do is I'd be in the middle, and sometimes I'd be tossing the dodgeballs to them, and they'd have to catch it in the air. All right. Again, what am I doing? I'm working on their eye-hand coordination. But they think it's a game. But in reality, there's a purpose. There's a function. They're having fun. Now we're done with the obstacle course. Now we're going into our karate training, whatever we're doing. We may do things where we had relay races where they would compete as teams, but they wouldn't run back and forth. They'd have to do martial arts techniques back and forth. So we might have the kids doing skip side kicks, have to tag the other kid. He goes back the other way doing front kicks. And whatever you decide to do, we would just have them do that. Again, they're having fun. They think this is a competition. Who's going to win the relay race? Meanwhile, in reality, we're fooling them, and they're not realizing we're actually having them work on karate. Okay? I was always a proponent in my kids' classes of teaching them full kata. I don't break the kata down into segments. If they're 4 years old, I could not tell you I've taught probably 100 4-year-olds where they could do seisan, seiyuchin, nahanshi. Okay? So this idea that you have to dumb it down for kids, totally disagree with it. So this type of training I felt helped the kids' classes. I did as kids' classes, made them more fun, more light, fooled them into realizing they were actually learning martial arts. Then when they got to my adult class, now the serious training starts. And all my kids went through my program, and many other kids, and when they get to the adult class, it's usually a bit of a shock factor. Now it becomes about life protection. Now the self-defense becomes real. Now there's no games. Now they're realizing. And that happens in our dojo. We bring the kid in at 12 years old into the adult class. We explain to the parents why, explain to the child why. Now he goes from being the strongest kid in the kids' class to probably being the weakest adult in the adult class. And technically, he's not an adult. He's 12. But we want him in there because we want them to be able to defend themselves when they get to high school. All right? High school is usually where some shenanigans go on. We want them to be able to defend themselves. All right? So they come in at 12. By the time they go to high school 2 years later, they've been dealing with training with adults, and that usually goes well. The adult classes are very serious. I don't do anything tournament-related. So everything is about life protection. I do a lot of things against actual attacks, knife, gun, club. We do ground fighting. The attacks are real. They're not karate-style attacks. Someone's trying to take your head off with a punch. Someone grabs you. They're trying to actually grab you. So you feel like it's a serious class. You're learning serious stuff. I once had someone I had many people that had traditional schools in New York say to me, "We don't understand how you have so many adults." And I would say, "I teach adult classes." And they would say, "I teach adult classes." And I would say, "No, no, no, you have adult classes, but you don't teach adult classes." So the marketing companies that have come in and again, they help you to make money. I'm sure they do. But they're not telling me what I'm going to do with my dojo. I'm not interested, okay? So they would tell you, "Oh, you teach your kids classes like this, and then you teach your adult classes like this." And the adult classes were basically the kids' classes. Okay, but most adults, they want to learn serious stuff. They're not going to tournaments. You get to a certain age, what are you doing? I mean, right now, my dojo in Arizona here, I have adults from 12 up until 70 and everything in between, all right? And I'm sure as time goes on and I get more students, I'm sure that'll vary, all right? In New York, it's the same thing. Youngest adult is 12. Oldest, I think, now is 73 or 74. Everything in between. I want that because the elder statesmen help with the younger people that are in the adult class. They see how the elder statesmen act, how hard they train, how serious they are, and they begin to get with the program. And it just keeps moving forward. Everything gets moved forward. I just went back to New York. I taught jiu-jitsu one night for 3 hours, and there were people there that were in their mid-60s. They'd never done jiu-jitsu, but they're longtime members of the dojo, and they wanted to experience it. And they were doing break falls and everything else, and it was fantastic. And now you have young people there, and they're looking at people that are old enough to be their grandparents, and they're out there on the mat taking falls. And that's what you want. You want to foster that. Like, wow, look at these people. Like, if I train, I can do this. And when I get older, I'll be able to do this. That's what we want in traditional dojo. The Tiger Schulmans of the world and the dojo that are only interested in you paying every month, those are no different than an LA Fitness, where most people join, they sign up for a year, the money comes out every month, and they're hoping you don't show up at the gym. That's their business model. Tiger Schulman, you join, he's got ironclad contracts, you're paying whether you go or not, he's hoping you don't show up. He knows he's going to get some people showing up, but their goal is to sign up tons of people every month. Tons. And knowing that a lot of people are going to drop out after a month or two, never to be seen or heard from again, but he's got that money for a year. Okay? We never did the scams where we tell a parent, "Oh, your child's the next Bruce Lee, and if you should sign him up for 2 more years for our black belt program." Never did it. If you train hard, you make black belt. If you train hard, you get promoted. If you don't, you don't. That was the way it was in the school. It worked out very well for us. We had a successful traditional dojo where we're also able to bring in many instructors from Okinawa, Japan, China, great seminars there for years and years and years, and they're still doing it there. And I'm starting to do it here in Arizona also. So it was great. You build that family dynamic in the traditional school where people feel you care. And we did care. We cared. We wanted people to get better. You do that, and you make some of those modern adjustments you have to make in order to survive in a modern climate, and you might be pleasantly surprised. Your enrollment in your traditional school might go up, and you might see some good things happen. Hope you've enjoyed this one. All right, just a little talk on running a traditional dojo and my experience with doing it and some of the things we did a little bit different. Appreciate everyone. Again, please click that like button, share, subscribe, think about becoming a member, and I'll see you next week. Next week, I think I'm going to be doing a podcast suggested by one of the members, which is when to attack first in a self-defense situation. All right? So have a good week. I'll see everybody next time. Thanks.